Right. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's talk show. I hope that you're all well and happy today. So this talk show is with Tashi Choedup with the Rainbow Workshop, and the Rainbow Workshop is a safe educational space for gender health, and sexual health for members, non-members, and parents of the LGBTQIA plus community in Vietnam. So it's a privilege for the Rainbow Workshop to cooperate with Tashi Choedup in one of the most interesting discussions regarding religions and gender. So we have had a chance to know Tashi through an organization named Rainbow Heat in Australia, and also people in our connections as well. So we would like to take this opportunity to send our appreciation to those who have supported the Rainbow Workshop wholeheartedly and to make this series reality. Okay, so Tashi Choedup, our speaker today, an outstanding individual from whom I honor to get to know. So one of the reasons why we would like to cooperate with them is because we believe that their journey to what we call a land where faith and gender identity live in harmony could inspire others to reevaluate or restructure their mindsets under the foundations of right knowledge and core Buddhist values. So this talk show aims to develop our community's self-strength and is an effort to create a safe space for all of us to come together to raise our concerns, asking questions to the speaker in a respectful and safe environment. Okay, so without further ado, I think that I would like to start this talk show by handing the turn back to Tashi so that they could formally introduce themselves. So Tashi, thank you very much for joining us today. May you introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your journey to Buddhism.
Hi, Haley. I'm the Rainbow Workshop. Thanks for having me and for this session. And I firstly want to congratulate and appreciate for all the work that you all are doing in Vietnam in making your society more inclusive and safe space for queer people, trans people. Thank you for that, and many congratulations on that. I am Tashi Choedup. You can call me Tashi. I use pronouns they, she. I am currently based out of Hyderabad in India, in South India, to be specific. I work with, I'm a trans person myself. I work with the trans communities and queer communities here. And also with the government, state government over here in regard with, advocacy and rights, policy work. We also, me and some of us queer people, trans people in Hyderabad have recently started a place called Queer Trans Wellness and Support Center, where we provide a drop-in space for queer people, helpline services, free legal aid through a collaboration with the judicial authority here, as well as free mental health services. Also, eventually we plan to start a shelter home for people who are forced to leave their houses also. So currently most of my time is taken up with that work. Other than that, I also work with faith spaces and faith organizations, religious organizations, in an attempt to make them inclusive, safe, and affirming for queer people and trans people. That's a bit about me. My journey to Buddhism, on the other hand, I've always been a person of faith, I think. From my very childhood. I think when I think about it in retrospect, as a child, I was interested in faith because it felt like a also because I was born in a particular caste, which is the dominant oppressor caste in India, which is a privileged caste. That also gave me access to Hinduism, and as a queer child who didn't know anything else and who didn't know how to figure out being different, faith always became my go-to place. Going to a temple or praying or being interested in faith became my thing as a child. Growing up, it became a much more of a deeper, intimate relationship with faith itself. So I've engaged and practiced Hinduism for quite some time in my life, and then I've had the opportunity to study and engage with Christ's teachings with a Christian teacher for some time. Also, at the same time, I met Buddhism, and my little more of interest and study in Buddhism felt like home to me. And that's why I decided I wanted to invest the rest of my life to study and practice Buddhist philosophy. That's what brought me, to be a Buddhist and to become a Buddhist monastic.
Wow, very, very interesting. So I'm curious, when did you explore your gender identity? At what age did you explore your gender identity?
I think all queer people, trans people explore their gender identities very young, because we live in a world where we are told this is how to be a boy and this is how to be a girl, and you can only be a boy, you can only be a girl from a very young age. As much as 2 years old children are given dresses, toys, food, other cultural things, depending on their gender given to them at their birth, which is either boy or girl. And queer children, non-gender conforming children, always are baffled at it, I think, in their own way, not knowing what to make of it. And I was like anyone else, I think. It never made any sense how things are so fixed in terms of that this is boy thing, that is girl thing, girls talk like this, boys talk like this, you play those sports, you play these sports. There's this very, very clear, absolute sense of segregation. Never made sense to me, I think. And I always felt I'm the odd one out, that I'm not able to make sense of this, that I am, and of course, it also felt like, oh, there's something really not okay with me. That's why I'm not able to make sense with all of these things that most of the world seems to be very okay with. But I think I always knew about my queerness. I might have only acquired the language and picked up the language to talk about it much later in life. But I think I've always, I know for a matter of fact that I've always been queer, I think. I think all queer people are like that, I think.
So how do you feel when you first discovered that you are a part of LGBT community? So how did you feel when you explore your gender identity? Did you confuse, or do you have any negative emotions, for example? Or it's just something that comes natural to you?
I felt mostly liberated because I suddenly have language. I can actually articulate, I can actually speak, I can actually think about it. I can actually connect with it and not shun away or behave as if it doesn't exist, or not able to make sense of what it means. But instead, I can suddenly see it, feel it, experience it, and also embrace it. My queerness. I mean, of course, I was worried about, concerned about my safety and well-being from other people, from my family members and from rest of the people in the society, my college mates, classmates, all of that, yes. But individually in my own body and mind, I was amazed to, kind of meet my queerness face to face in that sense, right? In a sense, in a more full-fledged manner, in that sense. So that's always a matter of joy, I think.
I see. Okay, and how did the gender identity encounter with your faith?
I mean, I think, like I said, I've always been a person of faith. So faith is not something that has been of course, it has been facilitated by various religious communities or religions that I practiced. But I think me as a person of faith, my faith is very unique to me, I think, very, very intimate, very personal to me. And no one else had a say in it other than me, I think. I believe I'm the only authority about my faith. I don't think anyone else is an authority on my faith. My faith is my matter, my personal matter. Yes, I understand the social, political context of it, but nonetheless, I am the authority on my faith, I think. How I practice it, how I see it, how I read it, how I engage with it, I have the final say, I think. And as a queer person, even when I was practicing Hinduism or Christianity, I always had a queer reading of those religions, I think. And similarly, as I practice Buddhism, I have a queer reading of Buddhism, I think. And Buddhism is anyway queer, I think. It's not a mainstream conventional religion in any sense, right? It's a very unconventional religion, during its time very unpopular also for the notions that it has, for the philosophies that it has taught.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So religions and gender, right? It's the two concepts that sound like they are not in favor of each other in some religions, right? In fact, there is a lot of frictions and misunderstanding or even practice that show clearly the clashing between those two. So, in a universal perspective, do you think that there is a space where religions, and I'm talking about all kind of religions and also Buddhism, okay, could engage with gender identity in a harmony discussions?
I think it's not a surprising thing how religion and queer identities or queer gender identities or any gender identity for that matter, especially the cisgender female identity and queer gender identities or sexualities don't go hand in hand with religion, because religion has been as an institute. I'm being intentional when I say as a man-made institute. I see religion as a man-made institute because almost all religious institutions till date are dominated by men. They are shaped and formed, constructed and designed in the limited imagination, or in fact the flawed imagination of men of this world, I think.
Yeah.
And religion that way largely served their purpose of dominating on all other genders, cisgender female, trans persons, queer people. Religion has been always used as a tool to has always been used as a tool to suppress, to dominate, to tell how queer people are wrong or what women should do or should not do. Religion has played a significant role in that all through, I think. So the mistrust and the friction is only natural and normal, I think, provided all the history that we have. But do I see religion and diverse gender identities coexisting? I think if not for sake of queer people, if not for the sake of trans people, I think religious people, religious men, cisgender men, for the sake of their own religion, should figure out a way about it. If not, eventually religious institutions are going to be big buildings and huge cathedrals or monasteries or with no people in it, because eventually all the people would be gone away and religious institutions would be nothing but hollow chambers of big buildings, which would really mean nothing, I think, even to them.
I see. Okay, very interesting. So the next questions is, so what does becoming a monastic mean to your gender, queerness, and sexuality? So I remember that in your journey to the land of faith and gender identity, a more specific questions is, which toolkits I would say have you used to shape your mindset so that it could direct you to where you are today?
I think a lot of people played an important role. I think all my feminist mentors played an important role to see where I am today. All my spiritual teachers played an important role, and all my friends played an important role in helping me figuring out or not figuring out or just being with me and guiding me, mentoring me, supporting me. Or even people who did not like me played an important role, I think, by harming me or hurting me, to see where I am today. So I am thankful and grateful to all of them. What does it mean to my gender, sexuality, to be a monastic? I think it means really almost nothing, but also everything. In a sense, because most people think if you become a monastic, your gender and sexuality disappear. It is anything but a myth. It is anything but untrue, because being monastic does happen on the basis of because unfortunately, being a monastic is also segregated strictly into men and women, at least at some level, if not throughout. That means your gender is a basis for your ordination as a monastic. Similarly, you take a vow of celibacy as one of the vows, at least in Buddhist tradition, and you take the vow of celibacy on the basis of your sexuality, that you actually have a sexual attraction, and from which you are restraining, or you're not acting on it, you're not engaging in your sexual desire. But for that, you have to have a sexual desire, right? So sexuality and gender doesn't disappear anywhere. In fact, they become the basis of my ordination as a monastic. So they very much exist while I am as monastic, because me being a monastic and having vow of celibacy is not that I'm not a sexual being. In fact, the other way around. It is because I'm a sexual being, I had to take vow of celibacy, of not practicing and engaging in any sex, right? Any sexual activity or sex as such. And similarly, my gender, whether as a trans person or a cisgender person, is again basis of how I see myself. It's also about how I see the faith I practice. How do I practice it in terms of how do I identify myself as I practice it? So all of that, so my gender and sexuality are integral part of me as a monastic, as they were, before I was a monastic.
I see. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a few minutes to see if our audiences have any questions for the speaker. If you have any questions, you can turn on your mic and you can ask Tashi directly, or you can type in a chat as well.
Hi, Tashi. My name is Khoi, and I'm happy to have you here today to share your journey with us. So I have a question about your ordination. So how was it for you at that time to find, a monastery and find, a teacher to, to do that ceremony for you?
It was quite, I mean, when I met my teacher first, she was a female assigned at birth, so cisgender woman, a nun, asked to ordain me after telling about myself and my gender identity and all of that. So my teacher had to tell me that, I am a female person and I'm a male-bodied person, right? So she cannot ordain me. And she had to send me to her teacher, who was a male-bodied person. Because I think his very close disciple sent me to him, he did not really question much. I received my ordination, but I also know that it's a matter of fact, it's an exception. It doesn't happen that often for a non-gender conforming person or a non-binary person or a trans person to get ordained within the monastic system within Buddhism also. But at the same time, I also am ordained at a novice level, right? I'm not fully ordained. I did not take my full ordination, my final ordination, because that final ordination is very, very much segregated between men and women, so-called categories of men and women. So I can't take that ordination unless ordination itself becomes accessible to all genders, which, has a long way to go, I think. And me living in a monastery after my ordination, my teacher did tell me one thing around that time: I can't live in a monastery, provided who I am and how I am, right? I know it for a matter of fact myself. I can't, not in a strictly gender segregated space, a male space, I can't. So she sent me, advised me to go to a semi-monastic setup where monks, nuns, lay people live together and practice together in both Gaia. So, that's how I managed to survive, study, and practice, I think. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very interesting questions. Any other questions from the audiences? Okay, so if there's no more questions, I will continue with mine. If you have any questions, just let us know, okay? Just jump in and then, feel free to discuss, okay? So I remember that you once shared in your interview on Zanpuk Global Seminar. So there are two kinds of believer in Buddhism, and I think that this notion is so interesting. Can you explain a little bit more how different their mindsets are? And do they impact our journeys to the land of faith and gender identity differently as well? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course, yes, I think. I mean, all faiths are important, I think. Both the faiths are important, I think. I mean, in Buddhism, of course, not my saying, but all the masters, all the learned masters and teachers from across the time have always emphasized that there are two kinds of faiths. One faith is solely on belief alone. The other faith is, of course, belief, but also a rational understanding, thinking, invested into it. So it's not simply a faith of belief, but also it's a faith of inquiry, investigation, and rational, logical thinking. So our teachers always insist on saying that faith that is based on rational thinking, logical inquiry, is a stronger faith. It sustains as we practice, right? Which makes sense when you really think about it, right? If it's a faith simply on belief, it's possible to be disappointed, or it is possible to be let down much easily, or challenged even easily by our own life situations or someone else from a different faith. But if our faith is rooted in a logical framework, reasonable, rational thinking, that means that we are realistic about it. We are skeptical about it. We are open to criticism about it. We are willing to learn from others. We are not going to take too much pride on our faith, but we are going to have humility about our faith, right? It's that not only in terms of looking at diverse gender identities, but anything in the world. If the faith is through logical, rational thinking and inquiry, there is openness to our faith. It's not closed. It is not shut. I think. I'm not saying this is not possible with faith of belief. Yes, that's also possible, but that takes a very special kind of belief, I think. But most of us might not be able to have access to that kind of pure belief, right? So in that sense, the most precious life to practice, to study. So because this life, human beings can basically think, logically analyze, investigate. If we can use that to rely on our faith, to engage with our faith, we are basically helping ourselves, helping our faith to become more stronger, more accessible, and more fair and just to everyone, including ourselves, I think. So, I mean, if it is not for the logical, if it is not for the faith of reason, there wouldn't be space in Buddhism for a lot that there is today, I think. If not for faith of reason, I think Buddhism would not have been able to adapt, accommodate so much that has changed in the world. I mean, of course, I'm saying that with clear understanding that it has Buddhism as a faith has a long way to go, accommodate much more, learn much more, and unlearn much more. But at least I think this faith of reasoning, this faith of reason will help, Buddhism going forward in many ways.
Interesting. Okay, so speaking about openness, it leads me to another question. So people often think that religions form sets of standards and believers should follow, right? So how do you think about the notion having faith practices in any religions conform to one standard? And how would you critically respond to this mindset?
I think it's disappointing at many levels how religious leaders, clergy people, religious scholars, people of faith refuse to see how damaging is this idea of that people of one faith, whether it's Buddhist people or Hindu people or Christian people or Muslim people, need to live only in certain way, and only then they are correctly Buddhist, correctly Muslim, correctly Christian. It's baffling, because when you really look into any religious history, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, there are many people across our religious histories who practiced their faith differently, engaged with it differently, manifested it differently, and expressed it differently, right? Because faith is a very, like I said, a very personal matter. It's a very personal thing. So how do I practice it? How do I experience it? How do I express it? how do I engage with it, is also very personal, and it's also very unique to me. My manifestation of faith is my manifestation alone. It can't be anyone else's, because my lived reality, my experience continues to inform my faith and the way I practice it. And that means my faith is very unique to me, and my faith is very unique in the larger religious and faith landscape. And if one is trying to figure out or kind of police everyone to practice faith only in one way, I think they are doing a great injustice to the faith that they are relying on, that they are confining and limiting the faith that is so vast, so imaginative, with so much of potential and so many manifestations possible, limiting it to one kind, one variety or one thing is unfair and is harmful to all of us, I think.
Interesting. Okay, so what does Buddhism say about queerness, and how is saying have impacted different generations where society and culture change with time?
Unfortunately, Buddhism also has homophobic, transphobic components to it. Coming across different time periods of the history, mostly from the 3rd century BC to 16th, 17th century, also all the way across different religious traditions. Of course, there is no one kind of Buddhism, right? There are many Buddhisms across the world, although all of them are founded on one Buddha's teaching, because they've traveled to different parts in the world, different cultural setups, political contexts and social contexts. Buddhism has been shaped and adopted in different regions differently. So, Buddhism in India would be very different from Buddhism in China, or Buddhism in Tibet would be very different from Buddhism in Thailand. So, but nonetheless, they're all philosophically in many levels, based on Buddha's teachings. But nonetheless, like I said, there are transphobic and homophobic components to it. But does it mean it is fixed? Does it mean there is no scope for anything? I don't say that, I think, because if anything about Buddhism, you can't use the logic of Buddha said so, or so and so teacher said so, or the scripture said so, because that logic doesn't stand any ground. It has to be anything, any argument, any case we are making has to be a logical, rational one. Can't be based on dogma, can't be based on popularity, can't be based on charisma of a teacher, but it has to be a logical, logically relevant statement, logically relevant understanding it should come from, right? So, yes, queerness kind of has resistance in Buddhism in some sense, if you talk about queer genders and queer sexualities. But when you think about Buddhism itself as a religion, I think it's a very, very queer religion, because when Buddha started teaching what now we call Buddhism 2600 years ago, it was not met, it was not welcomed, it was not immediately accepted. There was resistance from the existing faith traditions around Buddha's time, because Buddha was teaching something radically different. Buddha was proposing things that were radically different from the mainstream thinking during that time, which basically means that what Buddha was proposing was queer. It basically was different from the mainstream. It was basically different from the conventional setups, right? So, in fact, if one has to be a Buddhist, one has to begin to engage and look world differently. That means you have to have a different perspective to engage with the world as a Buddhist. You can't be a Buddhist and engage with the same old views. You have to adopt the newer perspectives, different perspectives to look at the world as a Buddhist. That means every Buddhist has to be in a broader spectrum. When you talk about it, has to be queer, to be a Buddhist. You can't be a Buddhist if you're not really queer. And I'm not talking about queer just in terms of sexuality and gender. I'm talking queer in terms of thinking differently, challenging the existing notions, right? Making space for new ideas and new possibilities.
Interesting. So that's actually remind me of one of the discourse the Dalai Lama has said in June 1997. So here is the context. So in June 1997, right, Buddhist lesbian and gay people seek clarifications from the Dalai Lama regarding his comments on queerness. So after listening to their personal story of the group members how they were subjected to discriminations on the basis of their sexuality. The Dalai Lama has said that it is wrong for society to reject anyone on the basis of his or her sexual orientations. And there's nothing wrong with people engaging in mutually agreeable sexual acts. It is unacceptable for anyone to look down on gay people. So I'm just curious a bit, what do you think about this statement, and which basis of Buddhism have the Dalai Lama used to derive his statement from?
I think a simple basis of love, kindness, and compassion, right? You don't need to go into much any different philosophy than that. That to discriminate fellow human beings, to discriminate against them, to look down on them, to have violence or other means of harassment on people based on their gender, sexuality is simply inhuman, simply unkind, simply not compassionate, and it's on that basic logic. I think His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama long ago said that no one should discriminate anyone on the basis of their sexual orientation, right? But of course, His Holiness in that very meeting also recognizes the fact of having texts which also considers homosexuality as sexual misconduct. And to that, what His Holiness says is that those texts were written in a particular social, cultural context, and they have to be seen in that way. And in the current world, if it is seen differently, then it can be debated, it can be argued about. And Buddhist society as a Sangha, as a collective, need to come forward to change those understandings.
Interesting. Okay, so is this correct when we say that Buddhism support diverse gender identity? And is it correct to say that Buddhism is an inclusive religion?
I believe Buddhist philosophy does that. Buddhist philosophy has the potential to accommodate any and all genders and any and all sexualities of all kinds of people, I think. Does Buddhists have that potential? Depends on how they interpret and practice Buddhist philosophy and Buddha's teachings, I think. But Buddhist philosophy itself as a teaching has the potential to do that. But we Buddhists as human beings who are flawed, limited in our own ways, need to figure out how do we practice Buddha's teachings in a way that this potential can be realized.
Okay, interesting. So I remember that I read one of the paper, one of the article in the internet, and you have spoken a lot about the idea of contemporary Buddhism, and how it has helped you to be more inspired and hopeful. Does this mean that we have different movement of Buddhism at the moment? And a very important question is, does it make Buddhism become binary in the sense of traditional and contemporary? The reason why I ask this question is because the diverse gender community has made several efforts to blur the binary concept in gender. So if the above hypothesis is true, how possible could it segregate our gender community in, binarily in Buddhism?
I think every religion has many categories, I think. Because again, like I said, all of us don't, no matter how much of religious hierarchy and leadership wants everyone to follow the religion in one particular way, practice their faith in one particular way, people don't do it. Because we are too many, we are all unique in our places, we all have diverse lived realities, and we all are going to practice our own faith very differently, I think. So that means there are always going to be many categories within any given religion, I think, because there are many people practicing it in many different ways. Traditional, orthodox, contemporary, modern, different kinds of ways. Buddhism also has many, many Buddhists who practice it very differently, I think. Like, for example, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh practices Buddhism, or taught Buddhism in a very political social context. His Holiness Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai Lama, also teaches Buddhism in a very political social context. Or Archbishop Desmond Tutu from Christian community also engaged with faith very differently, right? There is a component of the traditional understanding, but there is also approach towards the openness towards the changing world and the changing realities, I think, among all of them. which is a possibility to all of us, I think. I think the binary idea or binary attitude anywhere is wrong and anywhere is limiting, I think, because traditional and contemporary does not need to really be facing each other in some kind of contest, but rather figure out how to bring in the best in both the worlds and practice a faith that is beneficial to the larger world. I think that should be our focus and attention as people of faith. Different kinds of faith, but ultimately, how can we all benefit the larger world, or create a society and a world where everyone lives a loved, cared, affectionate, nurtured life, right? That has to be focus of all our people of faith, I think.
Okay. So another pause amidst this session for the audiences to get to have any questions, to ask any question to Tashi, if you have any. Any questions from the audiences? Okay. All right. So if there's no questions, I'm going to ask a few more questions, and then we can come to the Q&A session if you have any at that time. Otherwise, we can finish this sessions earlier. Okay. So in the third precepts of Thích, right, he said that sexual expression should not take place without love and commitment. So be fully aware of the suffering you may cause others as a result of your misconduct. So to preserve the happiness of yourself and others, respect the rights and commitment of others. Some people think that this third precept of Thích subtly support the diverse gender community. So how would you interpret his teaching in this point?
I think as Venerable Tishnathan was fondly known as Thai, Thai was always skillful and mindful of the context that he lived in, and he always taught what was needed to be taught in a given time and moment to the world. I think whether it was teaching to people who are stuck in war or hell-bent on waging wars, or people who are discriminating people on the basis of gender, sex, sexualities. Thai always had a way of engaging with all of these very, very complicated social, political contexts, I think. And in all of his teachings, one thing that always is common is about, love, care that is intentional, that is informed, that is also continuous, not in an exhausting sense, but in a very joyous sense, right? And I think, whether Plum Village has some space for queer people today, trans people today, it's largely because of what Venerable Thich has taught, and on the kind of principles that he established, Plum Village. And also, whether it is sexual expression, whether it is eating food, whether it is about sitting and walking, Thai taught about everything, literally everything: breathing, sitting, walking, talking, hugging, all of it Thai taught could be means to liberation, could be means towards enlightenment, and could also be means to suffering if one is not engaging with them skillfully, right? And Thai always taught how to do it skillfully, how to do it mindfully, how to do it in a way that it is, taking you closer to the enlightenment, closer to the nirvana, closer to liberation, and away from ignorance and away from suffering, I think. So this is no exception in that sense.
Okay, so based on your experiences, so which guidance could you possibly provide to those who are still struggling to find a sweet spot, I would say, between their faith and gender identity?
Like I said, I always want people to remember, I also try myself to do it all the time, is that remember that you are the authority of your faith. Don't let anyone else tell you what your faith means or what your faith can be or should be or can't be, because no one else knows your faith better than you do. Not even your teachers. Your teachers can guide you, teach you all that, but end of the day, it is you who knows what your faith is, what it stands for, what it means to you and to anyone else, right? So always remember that. I think never forget that. And yes, we live in a difficult world. Even within the Buddhist world, there are people that can be ignorant, people that can have a harmful discriminating attitude towards queer people, trans people. That should not let us access the Buddhist philosophy any less. I think there are wrong Buddhists, I think, Buddhists who don't know right always. But I think Buddhist philosophy, we can always rely on to find meaningful things in a rational, meaningful manner, I think. So it's good to remember these things, I think, as we go forward practicing our faith. And another important aspect, I think, be critical about whatever the faith we practice, whatever the religion we are part of, because it is very, very important, I think. If we are not critical about our faith and religion that we are engaging, we are doing injustice to it, I think, because being critical meaning that we are being honest with it, we are being open to learning, we are being open to unlearning, we are not simply complying, but we are fully living it, we are fully exploring it with all the openness that is possible. So be critical about your faith and religion, whatever that religion and faith might be. Yeah, I mean, that much I can say at this point of time.
Yeah, so you are the authority of your faith, and always be critical with your faith. Those are very good advice to the audiences and to those who might watch this recording later. So please remember that. And I totally agree with you, because I think that people experience faith very different. We have a different kind of faith, and I may have a different kind of faith, and I experience my faith in different social, cultural, and also political contexts. And when I receive no external value, I need to examine with myself whether it could be a way for me to internalize my faith in a very unique path, right? So that's a very good advice, and I think that we should all remember that we are the authority of our faith, and not only our faith, but anything in our life, we are in control. So at the end, we have to remember that we need, a very strong core, and also self strength to be able to realize that we are the authority of our life. So thank you so much, Tashi. So now I would like to give this opportunity to the audiences one more time, if they wish to further discuss with Tashi. So this is a chance for you to express your concerns and receive guidance, maybe on the do's and don'ts. You can share your story as well if you feel comfortable, or you can seek advice from Tashi if you have any, concern or challenges that you are going through at the moment. So we have questions from the chat. Okay, so to your knowledge, has there been any effort to make Buddhism more inclusive to both queer people and queer monastics, in Tibetan Buddhism, in which the role of a teacher is essential?
I think there are, of course, not so many attempts, but I think there are always small attempts in different pockets that are always happening, not just in regards with Tibetan Buddhism, I think across different Buddhisms, I think, across different traditions, I think, but there's still a long way to go. There's still not that kind of public open engagement or presence of queer people, trans people within the Buddhist spaces yet, I think, which basically means that there's a lot of work to do, all of us as Buddhists, I think, queer people and queer Buddhists and non-queer Buddhists alike. if we want Buddha Dhamma to be accessible, available to anyone and everyone who is interested in it, then there's a lot of work to do around it, I think. But there are some amazing teachers who have always took tough and difficult stance in supporting queer people, trans people publicly, I think, within Tibetan tradition. But of course, like I said, there's still a long way to go about it. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that answered your question, Koi. Any other questions?
I do not have any question, but I would like to say thank you for your presence today with us. And I learned a lot from you. One of your saying was something along the line that Buddhist philosophy teach us about there's like no limitation on gender, sexuality whatsoever. But the followers are the one who's put the limit on those philosophy. So I think it's a very nice wake up call for us Buddhists, all those who are practicing Buddhism. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, any other questions? If there's no further questions, I would like to send my deepest gratitude for today. Thank you for joining participants. Well, and Dung. So we hope you have enjoyed this or several way to ease any possible conflict that you may have with your faith and gender identity. If you have any questions for Tashi personally, please send questions. All right. Thank you so much, Tashi, for joining us today.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me, and look forward to working more together and creating more safe spaces for people around. Thank you very much again. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Right. Thank you, Tashi. Thank you, Koi. Thank you, Yung. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye, guys.